Xilonen is getting her first rerun in Genshin Impact, and despite being one of the most broken supports that has ever been released, she is already getting allegations of being power crept. But is this really true? In this video, we're going to go over Xilonen's updated teams and builds, a discussion on her strength, versatility, and future potential or concerns, plus a deep dive on her versus new healer competition Escoffier to help you decide if you should get her and how to make the most out of her if you do. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. We are almost at 100,000 subscribers, so if you're enjoying the videos, please consider subscribing. Every single one helps. Xilonen is one of the most powerful and universal buffers and supports in the entire game. She provides unconditional resistance shred for Pyro, Electro, Hydro, Cryo, and Geo characters, as long as there's at least 2 Geo-reactable characters in the team. This 36% resistance shred applies to multiple waves of enemies, to all enemies on the field, and doesn't even require a specific reaction to happen. So you can also heal your team, helpful for quality of life, as well as characters like Farina, and she can hold one of the most broken artifact sets in the game, the Scroll of the Hero Cinder City set. But she also has great options, even if someone else is running this set. So let's talk about what those are in her build guide. If someone else is running Scroll, one of the best things you can do for Xilonen is run the Archaic Petra. Historically, the Archaic Petra set has been somewhat annoying for most characters to play for someone like Zhongli, but I find that with Xilonen having a great deal of movement speed, you can easily skate to the crystal and pick it up, and it doesn't feel that clunky. It's just really a matter of remembering to do it. I think it's really interesting that this set was pretty much considered bad and Viridess Invenerer was the good set, whereas nowadays Archaic Petra is almost arguably a better set than Viridess Invenerer because of characters like Xilonen. Just something kind of funny. Archaic Petra gives a 35% damage bonus for the element that the crystallized shard was created. Comparing that to Scroll, which gives a 40% damage bonus for the types involved in the reaction. So Scroll can give the buff to 2 elements, whereas Archaic Petra only gives it to 1, and Scroll is a 5% greater damage bonus. But when you think about it, 5% isn't that huge, really, and a lot of hypercarry teams such as Neuvillette, Moika, Mualani, and more, they don't really mind only buffing 1 element, as that's really the only element that matters in terms of damage. So putting Xilonen on Archaic Petra is really very good, honestly, and a great alternative if someone else is running Scroll. Well, what if someone else can't run Scroll, but Archaic Petra's uses don't stop there? If the other character can't run Scroll, or they can't get the requirement as part of the rotation, such as in the Pyro Traveler video I just made on Mualani teams, Xilonen herself can use the Scroll set, and the other character can use Archaic Petra. Now, this is a little bit clunky because you have to not pick up the crystal with Xilonen, but Xilonen can create the crystal, and then another character, such as in that video, Pyro Traveler, can pick up the crystallized shard, thus allowing Xilonen to enable both artifact sets and just being a huge contributor of damage percent to that team. Both of these together is a 75% damage bonus, which is absolutely massive, actually. So Xilonen Archaic Petra is real, and it is real good. Next is Instructors. Instructors only lasts for 8 seconds, and often you'll want to use Xilonen first in the rotation. So by the time you actually get to the DPS, 8 seconds isn't so good. You might say 8 seconds is only 2 seconds less than Archaic Petra, but honestly, it's pretty huge. That 2 seconds is really, really big, actually. But that being said, if you can use her later in the rotation, or if you don't mind not getting the full uptime, it's still good. Instructors, yeah.
Yeah, still good.
For artifact stats, Xilonen wants defense percent and maybe some ER. Mostly she wants defense percent because that's what boosts her healing. Her res shred is not dependent on her defense, so it's not absolutely critical to max her defense. Her healing does max out at 3,000 defense, but it's not that important to max it out. If you're using her on Farina teams, it's a little bit more important because you might be giving up a little bit of Farina fanfare from not having the extra healing, but even then it's not the biggest deal. Generally, you want to go defense, healing bonus, and just look for defense and ER in your substats. You can go for crit rate depending on your weapon, which we'll talk about next. Obviously, Peak Patrol Song is her best in slot weapon. Favonius is basically her second best weapon, assuming your team can use the particles. And third, the Natlan Craftable gives defense percent, so if your team doesn't need ER, you can go for the Natlan Craftable. For level, you might be tempted to level her to 90 because she's a defense scaler, And if you're planning on maxing out Furina's fanfare and you have to go with something like Fav, then that could be worth it to level 89 her, save some books on the last level. But I've been able to just leave her at 80 because I use her on her signature weapon. For Xilonen's talents, you'll want to consider crowning her skill, as her resistance shred does scale with it, and you'll want to level her burst probably to 9 is the safest to max out Furina as much as possible without being wasteful with crowns. Keep in mind that crowning her skill is not as important as crowning main DPS characters like Novelette's charge attack or Mulaney's skill. You'll want to focus on those first. A lot of people will wonder, what is the value of her signature weapon? What is the value of her constellation? Neither of these are as impactful as big constellations for your DPS character. You know, Mulaney C1 or her weapon, Novelette C1 or his weapon. Those types of things will always be bigger than a Xilonen constellation or her weapon. Xilonen's constellation 2 is really hot topic. I wouldn't really recommend it for most players. The only players that should really prioritize it are potentially like Arataki Ito mains, because you'll want to run her in an almost mono geo comp just with Furina, Xilonen, Goro, Ito, and she kind of needs that Constellation 2 to enable that. Otherwise, she can't get the proper samplers for geo. If you have 3 geo, you need at least 2 of those reactable characters. For other elements, it's still a very good constellation, but let's look realistically at what it is. For Pyro, it's plus 45% attack. That's good, but is that like a C2 worthy upgrade? Unless you already have dolphined well into your main DPSs, I don't really see that being worth it for a Pyro character. For Hydro, max HP plus 45%. Again, it's good. It's going to be a damage boost, but how good is that really? Cryo crit damage plus 60%, that's pretty good. But when we look at cryos, we've got Escoffier coming out, so we'll talk about that soon. And then Electro. This Electro is one of the coolest. Restores 25 energy, decreases elemental burst cooldown by 6 seconds. This actually is relevant for a bunch of Electro characters, as they can be gated by cooldown. Although, does this all nearby party members will gain the effect? Yeah. So this is actually pretty good for, you know, raiden double hydro teams, for example, who are a little bit gated by burst cooldowns. I could see that being really quite interesting and quite good. So for most players, I actually don't recommend C2, even though a lot of people will call for it. I think it's not as good as, you know, investing into your DPS. R1 I think is a little bit better value because it's between a third and a half the wishes, and you get a 25.6% elemental damage bonus. But again, that's nowhere near what a dedicated constellation will give. So again, it's good, but it should not be your first priority when looking at vertical investment for your character. Now that we've talked through her build, let's go over her teams. It's very powerful to look at how many teams Xilonen actually has. And although yes, Escoffier will be stealing all the cryo and hydro characters away for like the best team, I think what you'll find is generally Xilonen is left with still an absolute truckload of great team options. And it's hard for me to imagine an account that could not benefit from Xilonen at all. There are a couple, and there's more exceptions than there were without Escoffier, but in general, I would lean towards recommending Xilonen for most accounts, unless you have a particular plan in how not to use her. And I do think that there are some very valid ways to not have to use her. I actually want to start with this Xilonen butt category, because a lot of these characters do want Xilonen, but there is a big Risley sized butt attached to it. And I want to open with Novelette to hopefully catch as many of you before you click off as possible. It is looking like Escoffier will be the ceiling for a Constellation 0 Novelette team. The asterisk is that this is only a very specific team. It is very specifically this one: Novelette, Furina, Citlali, and Escoffier. That's because we don't really have another cryo other than Citlali that can work here, or Hydro. Escoffier, to give the best buff to Novelette possible, needs all Hydro or Cryo in the party, and so this slot needs to be Hydro or Cryo. Citlali provides resistance shred and the damage bonus for Hydro and Cryo on this team, or so not for Cryo, but for Hydro on this team, which Novelette is the DPS, and Furina's doing a lot of damage too. And there's just no character that can replace Citlali. Ganyu doesn't work, any of the free-to-plays don't work. Maybe in the future we get a Cinder City scroll user that is a 4-star, that's a Hydro or Cryo, but for right now, this is it. And so if you require Citlali here, well, what does that mean for the other side? That means you can't use Citlali on your second side, whether that be Gaming Melt, Arlecchino Melt, or of course, Moika Melt. And the only option for Moika Melt other than Citlali is, you guessed it, Escoffier. So by taking both of the good cryo units that can enable Melt, you're saying, I'm not going to play Melt on the second side. This does raise the value of overloaded comps that use Moika or other comps that use Moika that don't use Citlali, such as maybe Kanich, I guess. So Clorand and Varessa are a good option for a second side. If your one side is using this team and you have Moika, then maybe you're using a team like this on the second side. These overloaded teams are really, really good, and a lot of times it hurts to give up to give up Moika. But if your Moika can't melt anyways because you're using this on their side, then that's an option where you might be doing this. But by and large, I think if most people have Citlali, they're probably melting with Citlali. So yeah. But if for some reason you ended up getting Citlali, you didn't end up getting Xilonen, you're not using Citlali on melt, then Escoffier is the best pull for Neuvillette here. But I don't really recommend this as an Exodia team for Neuvillette to assemble. First of all, this team doesn't utilize his C1 very well at all, because he's even getting a level less of Draconic stacks. If you invest in C1 Neuvillette, you're not getting nearly as much value from this team as you would normally. In addition, you have Citlali. This is a pro and a con, but for heavy investors of Neuvillette, it is mostly a con, in which case a team like this is starting to look better. Plus, something to keep in mind is Moika was already better than Xilonen on this team. Something to keep in mind because you can melt Moika. So what is this? The too long didn't read is, for a lot of players, Xilonen is still the best choice for Neuvillette because you're going to be using Citlali on the other side. And I think Xilonen is not the flex slot here. I think Kazo is more of an easier to replace character. You can replace him with another Animo unit, another scroll holder, and then Xilonen can use Archaic Petra, some sort of elemental applier, something else. So to most Neuvillette players, I still recommend Xilonen. But if you fit the criteria mentioned before, then maybe Escoffier is the right choice. Next is Hu Tao. Hu Tao does prefer Xilonen, but as long as you don't lose too many vapes, because sometimes Hydro and Cryo on a boss can remove each other, and then there's no element, and then you get an unreacted Hu Tao vape. But as long as that doesn't happen too much, Escoffier should be still quite good. That being said, Xilonen is still the preferred choice for these two characters. For Raiden, I have Xilonen, but because there's two buts. One, you might want to use Jean to save some primos instead of using Xilonen. I much prefer Xilonen personally, especially with the multi-wave, but Jean is still good, especially with the attack speed. And also, if you have Chevreuse, then Chevreuse might be preferred, especially if you have Constellations on your Raiden and not on your Farina. The Raiden double Hydro core with Xilonen is really, really good, and it gets better with Constellation 1 and 2 of Farina and, Yelan's weapon or Yelan's C2. And it does get better with Raiden's Constellations. And depending on if you have Constellations on Farina or not, that's basically whether I recommend this or Raiden's Chevreuse teams. As someone who doesn't have Constellations on their Farina, I prefer Raiden's Chevreuse teams, but I'm pretty sure if I had Farina's Constellation, even her C1, then I would prefer this team, especially given that I have Yelan's weapon. Yeah, but you can always go with Jean. So there's kind of two buts. One is you can go with Jean, and two, you might prefer Chevreuse. For Moika, what's the deal with Moika? Well, Moika's best melt team is definitely this one, but I kind of find Xilonen a little bit inconsequential most of the time. Yes, she charges up Moika so that she has max fighting spirit immediately, and you're able to always get full power bursts. However, just with Citlali, as long as you're doing a couple charge attacks with Moika, you're gonna have full fighting spirit by your next beginning of rotation anyways. The only time this doesn't happen is if you kill the end of the wave with Moika's burst. If you do, you'll still have enough fighting spirit to burst by the next rotation, but it won't be full powered, and so that might slow down your second chamber clear. Will it slow it down enough to matter? In my experience, no. Then that's just it. In my experience, no. In my experience, Bennett, Citlali, Moika is fully functional, and it just really doesn't matter what your last fourth unit is, as long as they're doing something. As long as it's Sucrose or Diona with C6 or Iansan. A lot of people are wondering, is Iansan better or is Xilonen better? Iansan is better, assuming, you don't start the chamber with 0 energy, in which case Xilonen's better. That's basically it. On the whole, I would say Jansan's better, but it's way too tall of an ask to get C6 Jansan. I find that as long as you have C6 Jansan, it's better than Xilonen with her weapon. Again, assuming that energy thing. And if you have C2 Jansan, it's better than Xilonen without her weapon. That's what I've personally found from my testing. This all could change if we ever get some sort of endgame where you don't start with any energy. If we get an endgame where you don't start with energy and you need to charge up Moika's burst right away, then Xilonen will be definitely the best character for this team by a lot more. But currently, I would recommend people just save their pulls and go for something like Sucrose or Diona or something like that for a Moika team. If you end up with Xilonen, great, right? If it's free for the side, awesome. It is the overall most comfy choice, but I wouldn't recommend someone put a pull there until you're already done with your second team, for example. I would take this as a moment to save a 5-star pull and just use something that you have, whether it's Kazuha, Kazuha, Iansan, Sucrose, whatever you have, use it there and save that pull for your other side. And then once your account is done, consider this like a comfy upgrade. Arlecchino is the same sort of thing, and so is Gaming. It's basically exactly like Moika. Citlali is the #1 priority, and Xilonen is technically the best, all things considered, because her buff works in AoE. It works in multi-wave. You don't have to hit each enemy. It just sort of always works. That's why I prefer Xilonen for these two on the whole, I think, the most. But Gaming has Shen and Arlecchino has those other options mentioned, so I wouldn't recommend wishing for Xilonen for them. Chiori needs her C1 to work with Xilonen, but if she has her C1, then it's very good. I'm going to skip the Xilonen section for just a second to talk about Escoffier. Escoffier basically just commandeers all the cryo and hydro DPSs, and she's now going to be the best in slot on all of them. I don't actually recommend getting Escoffier for Wanderer, but I think technically it's supposed to be the highest damaging Wanderer team right now. Farina, Escoffier, Farazan, I think it is what it was, which is insane. I'll try it and let you know, I guess. I could also see it being good for Child. I don't, again, recommend wishing for Escoffier for Child, but it probably will be the best. Any Shenhe team, Escoffier saves Shenhe. Hallelujah, praise whatever you praise. I think it should be Ganyu's best team, better than Melt. Yelan carries best team by far. She'll carry Ayato's ass to being decent. It should be Risley's best team, even better than Melt. And it should be Ayaka's best team. It should make her actually feel really good to play. It remains to be seen how good all of these will be in practice, but Escoffier will be awesome for these characters. Also, Moika and Citlali probably will be able to use Escoffier to Melt as a worse version of Citlali, which is something to consider. So basically, should you get Escoffier or Xilonen? Generally, you should get Xilonen. If you're pulling for a Hydro or Cryo teammate other than Novelette, it should always be Escoffier. And sometimes when you're pulling for Novelette, it should still be Escoffier, and other than Milani as well. And sometimes you can get away with neither, depending on your very specific account. Other characters that really want Xilonen. She's absolutely a must for Mualani teams, in my opinion. I think Mualani and Xilonen make up the main core, and then the next is your Pyro. I'm really liking Pyro Traveler the best. You give Xilonen Scroll and Traveler Archaic Petra. You can see the rotation in my Traveler video, and you're using Sucrose or Lanyan if you want defensive utility as the final slot. I really like this team. You don't have to use Traveler. You can use Shengling. You can use Moika. You can technically use Dea or Toma or yeah, but I prefer Traveler or Shengling or Moika. If you're using Shengling, you can swap Sucrose for something like Mona. You can do it with Moika too, but frankly, it's a bit too complicated for me to want to really talk about here, how the rotation works. But I really like Mona C1 and Shengling. This was my favorite team until I discovered the Traveler one. You can even use Yelan here. This makes the rotations with Xilonen easier. You can even use Farina. Some people alternate between burst, between skill and heal. That's kind of interesting. So yeah, but regardless, Xilonen for Mualani, highly recommended. Some people have the idea that Xilonen doesn't have enough crystallizes for Navia. In my experience, this is just not true. You just have to delay Navia's burst until after you set up the other two characters. So yeah, until you set up one of the other characters. So you would in this team, or let's use the best team in my testing. This is Navia's best team by quite a good margin. You open with Moika's skill, then you use Xilonen's skill, then you'd use Navia's burst, then you'd use Bennett's skill and burst, then Moika's burst, then Navia's charge attack. The most important thing to remember is to not open with Navia's burst. You want to delay it until right before Bennett in the rotation. That will ensure you get the max uptime on Navia's crystallizes. If you do this, you should have enough crystallizes. I think generally this is a skill issue to not have enough Navia crystallizes. You can also replace Moika with Farina, Moika with Shangling. You can keep Farina and use Yelan. A lot of people like this. Overall, I would rank Moika by far the best Navia team with Xilonen. Then second would be Plunge with Shenhe because it has a bit better consistency and AoE, and then I would rank the other Xilonen teams after that. How does Xilonen compare to Chiori? I find Chiori C1 to be a side grade for Xilonen, and Xilonen C0 or Chiori C0 a downgrade. Chiori could be considered a bit more comfortable to play because she creates some more crystallizes, but overall I still find it just a side grade, even at C1 Chiori. For Ito, if you have C0 Xilonen, you're looking at something like this, or the even more scuffed Moika Farina carry version. But really what you want to do is work on getting Xilonen C2, so you can do this team. And then this is probably Ito's best Geo team by far. This probably actually feels good to play. You can use Xilonen for Linny or Klee. The other stuff can be whatever you want. Farina stuff, Mono Pyro stuff, etc. Some other random stuff, you can do carry Yelan, although Escoffier plus something else will replace, I think it's Sitlali, will replace this as Yelan's best carry team, but it's still all right. This is Ayaka's current best team, but again, Escoffier will be way better for her here. Wriothesley Melt is a thing. You can use this to melt Wriothesley's hits. Moika just melts her burst, but mostly you're buffing Wriothesley on this team. You're swirling Cryo with Xilonen, or crystallizing Cryo, not Pyro. This is different from the on-field driver role that Wriothesley has, which is this one. This is the one where you crystallize Cryo and you're buffing Moika's damage from on-field Ryo. Both of these are going to be outshone by Escoffier. Maybe not this one, but this one really, we know it's a Moika team, not a Wriothesley team. But yeah, it will be outshone by the Escoffier version. So if you want to use Wriothesley, I do recommend Escoffier over Xilonen for him. Sure, if you want to melt his charge attacks, yeah, you can go for this, but it's not really recommended. You can get more consistent melts with something like Xiangling or a burning team. I'm just not that huge of a fan. I just don't think they're really strong enough to really invest in. It's still fine, like it's still good, but the juice isn't really worth the squeeze. I think Escoffier with Wriothesley will be much, much better. And overall, I think those are all the teams. So without further ado, let's go into your questions. So a lot of people are wondering, how will Xilonen age in the meta? Escoffier is coming out, she's extremely broken. How will this be in the future? Well, in the case of Escoffier, the freeze reaction, or specifically using Hydro and Cryo to characters together, is really, really ineffective right now. It's really, really bad. Freeze doesn't do anything for damage. So we needed a really broken, overtuned character like Escoffier to circumvent this. In addition, unlike with Overloaded and Chevreuse, the carries that we have for Freeze are a little bit undertuned in terms of raw numbers compared to other elements. So that's why Escoffier is overtuned the way she is. I don't expect that to happen for other reactions unless there's another reaction that they target that is a bit underpowered. I eventually do expect Xilonen to get power crept out of Aggravate teams, for example. I didn't even talk about Aggravate teams during our teams. I completely forgot to mention them. So here you go. You can run Xilonen in Aggravate. It's actually my favorite version of Aggravate. I know technically Kazuha should be a little better because he can swirl himself and that will cause Aggravates itself, which leads to more personal damage, in particular in AoE. However, AoE isn't all that common and multi-wave is even more common. And so I would personally rather forego something like Kazuha giving more personal damage for something like Xilonen, who has a longer buff up time and works in multi-wave. And overall, I have found just delivers consistently better results with good Aggravate characters such as Chlorand. That being said, I don't find Aggravate particularly strong in the meta right now, and so I expect Xilonen to get power crept out of Aggravate eventually. I could see her being power crept out of Electrocharge. I know we kind of just got a Roron, but it's kind of not the same. I would be somewhat surprised if she was crept out of a powerful reaction, such as Forward Vape or, you know, Vape Novelette teams. I would be surprised if she was power crept just because Vaporize is fairly strong. Melt is fairly strong. To release another buffer that would make Melt even stronger seems impossible to me. Making Vape stronger, while possible, well, that's actually possible. Anything that has a DPS ceiling below Moika, I feel like is fair game for them to buff. So I do expect Xilonen to be power crept out of most of the niche uses as they release better supports that bring more teams up to Moika level. However, I also expect her value to continue to rise because as more DPS units come out, most likely they will work with her because she was generally very flexible. It's genuinely difficult to make a kit that doesn't work with Xilonen. I do expect a bunch to not work with Xilonen, characters that are restricted to certain reactions that she's just by default off of, but due to the flexible nature of her kit, I do expect her to generally stick around in the meta, if not as a top meta pick, to at least be a very strong option. However, I do expect her to be power crept completely eventually, because that's kind of how live service games go. Eventually, the new stuff is going to replace the old stuff. Will it be during this calendar year? I doubt it, at least not for all things. Will it be during next calendar year? Probably not. But if we're talking 2 or 3 years out, then yeah, I think Xilonen eventually will be power crept. But that's just how things go. Overall, I do think she will age well enough that you can continue to consistently use her to clear the hardest content in the game, because she will most likely work with at least a good chunk of the new DPSs that eventually come out and that are very strong. But it does seem that the days of one character archetype or one character being the best buffer for every character are gone. Back in the day, Kazuha was the best buffer in the game, and he was basically the best buffer for every single carry. Then Xilonen came out, replaced Kazuha in most teams, although Chevreuse I think came before Xilonen, and I expect more and more characters like Chevreuse, like Xilonen, like Escoffier to fill more and more niches. But Xilonen will always have the ability to slot into a variety of teams for your second side of Spiral Abyss, one of your theater characters, or that new potential new endgame that has 3 teams that may or may not be coming. I think she'll always be a valuable pick because you need 3 off-fielders for most teams. That's a lot of supports. So I feel like most accounts will be able to use her for a good long while. C2 Xilonen or R1 Xilonen and C0 Escoffier. I play Novelette, Moika, Navia, and Xilonen all at C0. I would get C0 Escoffier and R1 Xilonen for sure. You could even skip on the R1 Xilonen. I think she's strong enough without it. But since you're playing with Novelette, Moika, Navia, you know, her R1 does work for all of them. So that's nice. Seems like you don't have Citlali, so Escoffier seems like a very smart play for Moika. You can use Xilonen Escoffier with Moika. Is Escoffier going to be better than Kazuha as well? For freeze teams, absolutely. If you're running Skirk on a melt team, we don't know enough about Skirk to really talk about that yet. Hopefully soon. I'll be covering Skirk very extensively. I'm really excited for it. Would Citlali or Escoffier be the ultimate choice for off-field cryo application? Having Moika, Arlecchino, Novelette, Wriothesley, Chaska's main DPS, who would be the better choice? I think overall Citlali would be better. Novelette, it's only if Wriothesley is your character that you really want to focus on, then you should be zeroing in on Escoffier. The others all prefer Citlali. What DPS archetype do you believe is missing might come out soon? Like I said, Aggravate. What else? Something for Superconduct, 100%. Superconduct is awful right now. Something for Hyperbloom. I know people still love Hyperbloom, but it could use more power. So something for Hyperbloom, something for Aggravate. I've always thought a Geo character that can react with other elements would be really cool. Like they create a new reaction themselves, like a Geo Electro reaction. I think that'd be really neat. I think there's always the option for mono buffers. I know people would really hate that, but that's something that they could do. A character that benefits if all of the elements are the same type. I feel like nobody wants that. I hope they don't get any ideas. If I thought about it, there's probably more. Novelette teams with Escoffier. There's only one Novelette Escoffier team, and it's Novelette, Citlali, Escoffier, Farina. There is no alternatives for any of them. That's it. So if you need Citlali to use with Moika, then consider Xilonen instead. Can you have Ylan, Farina, Escoffier core? Yes, this core will be excellent for all cryo characters, as will the Shenhe version, and any Hydro character that can normal attack frequently. Should I go for a Xilonen C0 weapon or save for Escoffier? I would definitely go for Escoffier over the weapon. That's way better value. We still don't have any leaks about Skirk's kit. We do now. It's really hard to choose between Xilonen and Effie. Effie is definitely going to be better for Escoffier based on the pre-release information that we have currently. There's still a chance that this changes, but currently, knowledge says Escoffier is much better for Skirk. I don't know that you should get C1 Escoffier though. What if Skirk's C1 is really good? Maybe you should go for that. Hard to say. Definitely wait and see. I mean Arle, Chaska, Novelette, but I want to pull Skirk. My current plan is to pull Xilonen, Escoffier, and Skirk. If both Escoffier and Xilonen are worth pulling, or if I skip one in order to guarantee the other. If you want to maximize Arle, you should get Citlali. If you want to maximize Chaska, my favorite Chaska team was Farina, Bennett, Jansan. That was my favorite Chaska team by far. But the Citlali ones are pretty good too. And for Novelette, I think like Escoffier plus Citlali is the best. But if you're planning to pull Skirk, you'll want to use Escoffier with Skirk. So then in that case, I recommend Xilonen. So for Arle, I recommend Citlali. For Chaska, you don't need either because you already have Farina and stuff. For Novelette, I recommend Xilonen. It's kind of whoever you want to put your eggs in, which basket you want to put your eggs in, whichever DPS you enjoy the most, that's the one you should get the better support for. The fortunate thing is Citlali does work with all 4 of these characters, and Xilonen works with 2 to 3 to 4 of these characters, and Escoffier works with 2 to 3 of these characters, being Skirk, Arle, and Novelette, depending on Citlali. So overall, you can't really go wrong, and therefore I would prioritize the one you want to max out for. I have Novelette, Farina, and Arle. Do I hold for Escoffier and potentially Skirk, or do I grab Xilonen? So if we're trying to max out these 2 teams, you're going to need Citlali to go with Arlecchino, which means that Escoffier for Novelette doesn't make sense, which means that I would generally gravitate towards going for Xilonen and then skipping Escoffier and saving for Citlali for your Arlecchino. That's what I would do just based on this information alone. Ayaka and Xiao are my favorite characters. Should I pull for Xilonen to get Faruzan copies or Escoffier for Ayaka? Well, I would try and snipe 2 more copies. I know I never recommend pulling for 4 stars, but I would recommend sniping 2 more copies of Faruzan if you can for your Xiao. If you can't do it, if you end up getting Xilonen, probably not going to regret it, although neither Ayaka nor Xiao really want Xilonen, but probably eventually you'll end up with someone that can use Xilonen, and it's kind of worth it to get Faruzan copies, especially if you're early in pity. If you're really late into pity, then maybe I wouldn't do it and wait for the next Faruzan banner. If you're really late into pity, then I would get Escoffier for Ayaka, because ideally, the best timeline is you snipe 2 more Faruzan copies, you get your C6, then you use your remaining pulls to get Escoffier for Ayaka, and then you have best of both worlds. If you're close to pity though, then maybe stop pulling and just get your guaranteed Escoffier for your Ayaka and get the other Faruzan next time Faruzan reruns. That's what I would do. For free-to-play Nouvellette Kazuha Farina team, who's better, Xilonen or Escoffier? Xilonen, not close. Does Xilonen C0, C2, or R1 make old characters relevant again? Seems like new characters are power creeping old characters to the point where I've had an easier time with new bosses with C0, R1 new characters than heavily invested C6 old characters. Yeah, the new characters are really, really, really strong, especially early constellations. C1, people used to say that C2 Raiden is like getting a C6 early character. That tells you how bad the old C6s was, because nowadays a C1 Nouvellette is like a C3 Raiden. So I wouldn't say a Xilonen at C2, depending on how old we're talking. I wouldn't say a C2 or R1 Xilonen makes old characters feel like new characters. I wouldn't say it's that strong. I would say Escoffier kind of makes Ayaka feel, probably, we don't know yet, but when she comes out, will feel more like a new character. But the new breed of DPSs are sort of on a different level. And C2 Xilonen isn't really going to change it that drastically. Maybe someone like Ito. You'll feel a big difference. To know what things to go for to make old characters feel really good, I would kind of have to know which characters we're exactly talking about. Sometimes it might be Farina C1 or C2 that really make the older ones shine. Sometimes maybe it would be Xilonen, or sometimes maybe it'd be Escoffier, sometimes maybe it'd be Lali C2. It sort of depends on the character. I'm using Lisa, Nahida, Xilonen, Farina. Is Xilonen best in slot? Yes, Xilonen is best in slot. However, I would consider replacing Nahida with maybe like a Nouvellette or something, and using Lisa. Well, I guess you're using Lisa as a main DPS. If you really want to use Lisa as a main DPS, you don't really want to be worrying too much about the hyper blooms, because Farina's not going to generate that many hyper blooms, and if your Lisa's built for damage, she's not going to be proccing that many. So we're Lisa, Farina, Xilonen. I think maybe we're doing Auroran, and then we're going for Farina Constellation. So you're going to use Petra Xilonen, you're going to use Scroll Auroran, C1, C2 Farina, and that's how you want to best buff your Lisa to make her do the most damage possible. And yeah, you can consider, and after you get Farina C2, you can consider Xilonen C2. That's what I would do for max Lisa. You could also do Yolan here instead for some extra sub DPS damage. And so it's kind of like a Raiden team, except with Lisa instead of Raiden. Xilonen providing the energy refund is also really good on this team. I have Arle, Varessa, Farina. I want to get Navia and Mualani. Is it worth it to pull for Xilonen? Yes, it is. For Navia and Mualani in particular. Varessa and Farina. For Navia and Mualani, they really want Xilonen, so I definitely think it would be worth it. I don't see anyone replacing on Mualani and Navia teams. For Varessa, I wouldn't bother. Chevy, Ayansan, and, Pyro Traveler or whatever is more than good enough for Varessa. And then, Navia can use Farina Xilonen or Xilonen Bennett Moika, and Mualani also really wants Xilonen. So I have Moika and Nouvellette, and I'm wondering if Xilonen or Escoffier would be better for my account. I'm also interested in Skirk. Escoffier is worth picking up for Skirk, and since you already have Lali, but she's going with Moika, you don't really want Escoffier for Nouvellette. So if we're just talking about Nouvellette, then Xilonen would be definitely worth it. But if we're considering Skirk, then you probably really want Escoffier. I would personally prioritize Escoffier for Skirk, but I'm a fan of Skirk, and Nouvellette is kind of boring at this point. So, I mean, he's very strong, but, So it really depends. Do you want to buff your Nouvellette with Xilonen, or do you want to buff your Skirk with Escoffier? Who looks better design-wise, Xilonen or Escoffier? I'm a big fan of Escoffier. I really like Xilonen. I think she has a good design, but personally, Escoffier hits me a little bit harder. but not like that. Linny and Child main. Should I get Escoffier or Xilonen? I think that Child freeze with Escoffier. I mean, it's kind of wheelchair, right? Child is kind of being carried, but I think it'll probably still be pretty good. I think I would go for that over anything else. I have no idea who the fourth teammate could be. I'd be robbing Linny from my melt, Lily from Linny from my melt team. I don't think Xilonen goes that well with Tartaglia. She would be good with Linny though, so you could do mono pyro. You could just do mono pyro with Linny and then do freeze with Child. Child would really want the Citlali. So Linny, if you don't have Farina, then you can't really go for Escoffier. So you need to do Child, Farina, Escoffier, Citlali, and then you can do Linny, Bennett, Lanyan, Shangling. That's what I would do. Double Hydra Raiden. Will Xilonen be an upgrade to Jean or not? Is C2 Xilonen worth it? I think C2 Xilonen is worth it if you already have constellations on your Farina, and I do think Xilonen is an upgrade to Jean, particularly for multi-wave. And yeah, I would recommend Farina constellations first. Is it still worth it to get Escoffier since C2 Xilonen is a buff for Hydros and Cryos? How does it compare? I mean, I haven't seen calcs on it, right? And I haven't tested it myself, but Escoffier gives more to Cryos than C2 Xilonen. It's frankly, it wasn't even close at C0, and it's a little bit closer at C2 to the point where you can get away without it, but it's still a noticeable upgrade to have Escoffier. That's at least my understanding. Escoffier is that broken. Plus, then you can use Xilonen on the other side, so it's more value as well. What team comps to C2 Xilonen enable? The main new ones are the mono geo teams with one, like to use just one geo or to use 3 geo. Is it worth getting her for Yoimiya to help her ult more frequently and fix her large downtime issues? I think C2 Xilonen would be pretty significant. Like if you're using, Yoimiya on like a Farina Yelan Xilonen team, kind of like the Raiden Lisa team we were talking about, then C2 Xilonen should really help with rotation length reducing. The energy refund should be quite useful, to be honest. I think her C2 is like really fun for electro characters, especially someone like Yai. For sure. It's a lot of investment. It's not going to be as good as, again, C2 Farina, but still going to be very, very strong. Is Peak Patrol a good vertical investment for C1 R1 double Hydra Hu Tao with C2 Farina, C2 R1 Yelan? See, you got me. I was going to say no, but then you said you already have all the other good early vertical investments. So at this point, yes, Peak Patrol is going to be your next upgrade path. You might not see massive increase to just Hu Tao's numbers, but Farina and Yelan will both be benefiting. Like all three of them will be benefiting from Xilonen's signature, so it's a pretty good idea. I want to make the best possible week of Vape team. Pull Janssen or Xilonen. Why are you attached to Vape? I would go for C1 Farina. Oh, hold on. I forgot that you're not using Citlali, so you need the fighting spirit, so you need Xilonen. You need Xilonen. Do not get Janssen. You need Xilonen, you need Xilonen. Xilonen. If you don't have Citlali, Moika needs Xilonen. That's just how it goes every day of the week. Ganyu Freeze team. C2 Xilonen or C1 Escoffier? Escoffier. Easy. Xilonen Sig versus Escoffier Sig. Escoffier's Sig isn't quite as good, but it comes with Escoffier, so it's better. C3 Xilonen worth it? No. C2 Escoffier be better? Yes. This is the toughest decision. Well, it looks like you don't have Citlali. So your Moika needs Citlali. So you need to save for that. And your Novelette can't even use Escoffier without Citlali, so you need Citlali. So overall, the answer is get Citlali. And if you must have one of these two, which, I mean, obviously, Novelette and Moika both benefit from Xilonen, so I would get Xilonen. Yeah. Unless you want to buff your Ayaka and Ayato, in which case, then you need Escoffier. So if you want to buff your Novelette and Moika, it's Xilonen. If it's Ayaka and Ayato, then it's Escoffier. Will Xilonen collect dust if I pull for Escoffier? You're going to use her with Novelette until Skirk. So I mean, if you're using Escoffier with Skirk, that means Novelette can't use Escoffier, which means that you're going to need someone to buff your Novelette, which means Xilonen will likely be the best Novelette buffer for a really long time. I don't think she's the first to be replaced on a Novelette team, so I think it still has value to get. If you can get both, then I think it's valuable to get both, to be honest. I think Novelette really loves Xilonen. If you were a content creator, who'd you choose? I must have Skirk. So if I had to choose between the two and I didn't have both, Skirk is possibly my favorite character. Like, she has the potential to be my favorite character overall, depending on how her kit ends up being. I love her design, I love her personality and her lore. So given that, I would always go for Escoffier. But I also do love Mualani, so I would have already have had Xilonen to buff my Mualani. So yeah, I don't have Xilonen yet. I'm considering no Farina. Should I just get Escoffier instead? Escoffier is going to be pretty mid without Farina, unless we get more Cryo or Hydro off-fielders that somehow replace Farina on those teams. So it seems like getting Xilonen is going to be better, especially since Farina just reran. Universal or niche supports, it depends on what you like and what you have. Some universal and niche supports are better than others, so it really depends. In the past, it's been all about universal. Now it might be leaning more towards niche, but it really depends on your character, really on what teams you want to build, really. Optimizing Arlecchino. Most important thing is to get Xilonen. That would be the most important thing if we're trying to optimize Arlecchino. And then whether you get Xilonen or Escoffier kind of depends on the other characters. Who is good for Arlecchino, Xilonen or Escoffier? It's Xilonen. After we test Arlecchino with Escoffier, then I'll be able to tell you more, but it'll be too late because Xilonen will be gone. So I would say Xilonen. Need a proper answer. I'm guaranteed just a 10 pull away from obtaining any 5-star. I'm not sure what to get now. I have the following characters: Muika C1R1, Navia C01, Novelette C01, Hu Tao C01, Nahida C01, Raiden, Ganyu, Zhongli, Ayaka, Cloran, Coswell, all C0s, no signature weapon. Which would be best to get? I'll get Xilonen later, but I don't have Xilonen or Farina. Should I go for Escoffier and build a Skirk team, or C2 Muika with Xilonen and Xilonen, or use this guaranteed for Skirk? If you're going to build a Skirk team, you should get Escoffier, but if we're trying to upgrade your account as a whole, then Xilonen's a really good pull because she will improve your Navia team. You can do Navia, Xilonen, Muika Bennett. It'll upgrade your Novelette team. It'll upgrade your Hu Tao team. It'll upgrade your Raiden double Hydro, but you don't have Xilonen, so you can't do that anyways. So it really depends. Do you want to build a Skirk team, or do you want to, if you have to choose between them, do you want to build a Skirk team, or do you want to upgrade, do you want to use Navia with Muika, or do you want to upgrade your Novelette team? Couldn't 36-star because of lack of supports, also skill issue. If we're trying to 36-star, probably Xilonen can do it for you. And join our Discord server. The help channel is really, really helpful. A lot of people have joined. A lot of people have had a lot of help. They're awesome there. Let me know if you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe. And if you don't want to do that, that is totally fine. Just watching the video has been more than enough. Thanks so much. Bye for now.